Hey folks, my name is Vikrama Dhiman. I'm very excited to be at DevCon 2022, and I will be talking to you about one of the most crucial aspects that affects not only your productivity, your morale, but also your happiness. We'll come to that topic in a bit. First, a bit about me. As I said, my name is Vikrama Dhiman. I lead the mobility products at GojeK. GojeK is one of Southeast Asia's most loved companies. We contribute to more than 2% of the GDP of Indonesia, and we are essentially in the business of moving people and moving things. Mobility is about moving people, and when people move, they also can move things, which is food delivery, grocery delivery, e-commerce delivery, and so on. And in some ways, it can also be called the heartbeat of GojeK. Prior to this, I worked with a bunch of companies, both startups which were cash strapped, as well as large public limited organizations. So hopefully I can bring that breadth and depth of experience in the topic that we will be covering today. So over to the topic. The topic that we're going to be talking about today is to get your idea prioritized. And the idea that we are talking about could be anything. It could be a product, it could be an initiative, it could be a cultural thing that you want to get implemented. It could literally be any of those things. And a lot of work morale is dependent on getting your idea prioritized. Why? Because you feel heard and you feel that your voice matters. But a lot of people also feel that their ideas don't get prioritized while somebody else's makes those prioritization calls, typically executive, product managers, or your managers. In this presentation, we will talk about some of the secrets which help you get your ideas prioritized, and you will also be able to figure out how you can get yourself heard, how you can have your voice reach the layers that make those prioritization calls and perhaps be on those prioritization tables yourself. We will be talking about this in a series of 4 principles. The very first principle that we will be talking about is the mechanics principle. Okay? So each of these principles are incremental principles, which means that you should be taking the first principle first and then work on top of each principle and go to the second principle, third principle, and fourth principle. Okay. Now, it's unlikely that if you do the fourth principle without doing the first principle, then it is going to work. So therefore, if you are using this as a workbook, or if you're using this in your workplaces, then focus on the order of in which the principles are being shared as well. Principle number 1, the mechanics, which means that how you present your ideas and what constitute your ideas is very, very important. All the gaps that are there, which are not getting things prioritized, are yours to fill. The idea is yours, so you should be the one who is taking all the initiative that you can in getting that idea prioritized. Now, the single biggest example or the single biggest impact that I have seen made by designers, product managers, engineers in getting their ideas and their product pitches and their improvement pitches getting heard in an organization, whether it is a startup or a large company, is using an adapted format of what's called the product opportunity assessment. Okay. The longer form of this is available on Marty Kagan's blog. You can go and definitely look that up. In fact, if you could actually search product opportunity assessment, the first link is that. But I like to use a slightly adapted and a briefer version of that. Let's see what that is. A lot of us are in the business of solving problems, okay? But we miss one crucial aspect when we are solving those problems, which is identifying who has that problem. Hence, identifying who has that problem is very, very important. You have that empathy for that problem, perhaps because you also know who has that problem. But if you're not going to articulate who has that problem to others, then they may not ever develop that empathy. Empathy is not towards a specific problem. Empathy is towards someone having that problem. Okay. Once that is done, then identifying what problem do they have seemingly becomes the next easy thing. Well, it's not easy. Why? Because problems have layers. You are going to scratch only the surface if we are going to say, oh, people are taking too much time in figuring this thing out. Okay? Or they're taking too much time in figuring this transaction out. Okay? Or we don't have safety features on our app. Go one level deeper and find out why is this a problem as well. Okay? So what problem do they have? Figuring out that without figuring out why they have that problem gives you only surface level problems. In safety, one of the problems that, for instance, women would have is that they always have to be on the guard. They always have to be watching their back, which means there's a lot of mental stress that accumulates over a period of time in women who especially have to navigate a chaotic city, a public transportation, a public workplace, and so on. And hence, products which will actually empathize with that and make cities more accessible or make workplaces more accessible or reduce the stress will have a higher chance of being successful. Okay? And hence, the problem that we actually started with was safety, but actually where we have landed on to is understanding women and giving them that comfort that they would probably have in their homes with their families, and how do we bring that into the apps that they are using, into the ops that they are experiencing as well. This takes a lot of practice, but engineers, designers, product managers, all of you are trained in understanding the 5 whys. Peel through the surface, figure out what problems are we really trying to solve. Now that you have who has the problem and you also understand what is the real problem that we are trying to solve, we then have to go into the next steps. Now, if you are not a product manager, or if you're not a designer, or you're not from research background, or you're not working in strategy functions, you may not be able to do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 all yourself, which is fine. Just doing 1 and 2 in a way in which you are articulating that story really well and articulating both the people who have the problem as well as what problem do they have, you may actually start seeing a lot of traction. You may actually start seeing people navigating towards you in giving the next steps of the assessment with you. They may be pairing with you, or they may pick it up all themselves. Okay. Don't get disheartened if they don't. That generally indicates that 1 or 2 definitely need more work, or figure out what the feedback is, that perhaps the problem or the problem that they have are not going to be big enough. Go back, work on 1 and 2 so that people can then start pairing with you on the next steps. Third is usually something that your product manager or somebody from business side or somebody from your design and research team can help you with. Okay. There are sizes that you can do based on simple surveys. You can also go back and look at the research, or you can do a research that can help validate this particular size as well. One of the best ways in which you can get traction or identify how big the opportunity is by looking at alternatives. Okay. Alternatives don't necessarily need to be competitors who are operating in the similar space, but they can also be people or how people are using those particular products themselves. For instance, note-taking is a big pain point on mobile, and a lot of people just create single-person WhatsApp groups to keep reminding themselves or make a note and so on. Okay. Does that indicate that there is a space to have something which is really accessible, really easy, really simple to do for note-taking? Perhaps there is. Okay. And hence, look beyond your competitor apps, look at all the things that customers or people whom you're solving the problems for are doing to solve that particular problem. Okay. Now comes the crucial aspect. 1, 2, 3, and 4 in general should be good enough in getting you heard or making the list of potential candidates for getting the product opportunity assessment and even getting the idea prioritized. But if you can also pair it with 5, which is why are we best suited to pursue this, or how are we going to differentiate, then it becomes even better. Why we are best suited to pursue this? It can be because it goes with our mission. It can be because it goes with our goals for this particular quarter or this particular semester, or it can just be that our pitch, our marketing pitch is designed to be around this particular topic. Here you are now getting into a space which is a murky space. You're both into the problem space as well as into the solutioning space, because you're trying to figure out a solution which works for your product in a way in which it gives you a leading edge. Yeah. But that also sometimes means that you have to go back to the problem area and identify the real problem or that angle of the problem that you may want to be solving. Yeah. And again, go back to an example. If you're working on a space for families, then perhaps one of the ways in which we are best suited to do this is because we take a view of teenagers and we look at families from the eyes of teenagers, and therefore we give tools for teenagers to manage the digital needs of their families. And that's perhaps our pitch. So look at what that pitch is, look at who your target segments are and what we can do. Again, you don't necessarily need to do this, but you need to know that if you've only done first and second, the rest of the steps also need to be done. And it's usually better if you are involved in this with whosoever is working on this. And if you are not, then understand that they are working through these steps before your idea is going to get prioritized. The 6th step is an additional step, which is how are we going to measure the success of this or make money from this product? There are numerous materials and product videos which are available on metrics and on how we are going to be able to monetize and monetization techniques. So we'll not go into full details of this. And also, if you have gotten to step 5, then it's highly unlikely that the idea is going to be discarded only because it's not going to be making money now, or we are not clear on what the success metrics are. These are things that get figured out if there is a real problem and a real need, and it is a large enough problem. The final part is where most ideas which have actually gotten to this stage don't get prioritized. Why? Because why now? That is very crucial to answer. Why now, unfortunately, is something that you can't influence beyond a point of time, but you can still do a lot towards it as well. And one of the first things that you need to do towards that is to find out when do you need to pitch your idea? When do you need to work on that particular idea? And when is the organization ready to take that idea? Don't get disheartened. If you've made it from 1 to 6, it's just a matter of time. So some examples that we will take where you are solving for engineers or for DevOps people, since this is a DevCon conference. Okay. So who can have problems? As we said, it's not just essentially only about your customers. It can also be your team and engineers. And if you can tie it back to the customers, that because the engineers have these problems and therefore we have problems for our customers, for instance, slower releases, okay, or slower fixing of bugs, then the idea becomes even more compelling. What problems can be there? Productivity is lower, slower development pace, and hence the releases go out lower, the fixing of bugs is lower, and because of that, we lose out on so much revenue that we could have made because of this. Okay. And how to validate some of these solutions that we have? Well, we don't necessarily need to get the whole idea prioritized, but we can break it down into chunks, and each of those chunks can also get prioritized. Does this work, or is this only theory? Well, it does work. In my experience, I have seen this getting both small companies as well as very large companies. In one of the largest telcos that I worked with, we used to work with a supply chain of more than 50 suppliers. Okay? Some of those suppliers were not even in the organization. Creating that middleware where we could get all the APIs and then create a single point for our mobile apps to integrate with helped us create more in the experience for our customers than anything else that we had done so far. Yeah. But creating that visibility in that sense, that why are we not able to fix these bugs? Why do we have so many downtimes? Why is our productivity so lower? Because of this, makes it easier for product managers to pitch that case to executives and get these ideas prioritized. Yeah. So go back, look at the product opportunity assessment. Just doing product opportunity assessment itself is useful for you. You also sometimes understand that perhaps my idea is not really fleshed out and I'm getting unhappy for no reason. Okay? And why a certain other idea got prioritized is because it checked all those 7 boxes very, very easily. We move on to principle number 2. Okay? Now, the principle number 2 works on top of principle number 1. It's highly unlikely that you will be able to do principle number 1 without figuring out principle number 2, and principle number 2 without figuring out principle number 3, and that without figuring out principle number 4. Okay. We have been conditioned to think of life and work as 2 separate boxes. Unfortunately, that is not true. Work is life, okay? And life is relationships. If work is life and life is relationships, work is also about relationships. It's not cutthroat. It's not about being only about work. It's not about taking the soft things out from the workplace. In fact, those soft things are actually what makes a workplace better than others. Okay. So the relationships are always work in progress. If you are not investing in those relationships, then it's also going to be unlikely that you are going to get a lot of your voice heard, a lot of what you are pitching heard. Okay. It's not just always about what you are presenting, but it's also about how you are presenting as well. And crucially, a truth that we don't want to confront, who is presenting as well. Okay? And people who get a far better success, it's not because they are charismatic or they have relationships. It is because those relationships help them refine those 7 points that we talked about even more. And that is why those ideas get accepted. Okay? So one of the best advices that I have seen in my career is to never eat alone. Okay? But also don't eat only with a specific set of people, because then you will not be having those relationships across the organization. Okay? And also important that you don't just wrestle with pigs, which means there are people who are always ready to debate, always ready to argue, always ready to run you down. Okay? Get your idea to them, find out what the weak spots are, but don't over engage or over argue in that particular period of time. Understand that in a large organization, especially, things move slowly. The more radical your idea is, things will move even slowly. Okay? And the side advantage of this is that if your idea is any good, you're likely to get traction informally without you having to do those 7 steps yourself too. The key relationships that engineers specifically have are product managers and software engineers, and your manager and software engineers. Now, typical advice that you would see in social media, in blogs, are for product managers on how to work with engineers. or managers on how to manage engineers. You rarely see advices on engineers, how you should work with product managers, or engineers on how you should work with your leaders or your managers. And trust me, upwards management and sidewards management is very, very important as well. Okay? So it's not just your product manager's job to invest in the relationship with you. You should also make that investment the other way around too. Similarly, make that investment into understanding your manager, their constraints as well too. And that will have a huge reward into you understanding the organization and you understanding the mechanics in the way in which the organization works too. Before a persuasion happens, a lot of persuasion happens. Okay? In fact, there is a book which is on that exact specific topic. A lot of ideas which seem like, okay, somebody just pitched them and they just got accepted, like without any background, without any work on their side. A lot of those ideas have been seeded. A lot of those products have been seeded over a period of time, subtly, even sometimes informally, and even sometimes without design. Okay? But you can use that for yourself. Okay? For instance, if you're looking to get productivity or engineering productivity prioritized or test coverage prioritized, start getting the problems of QA, of engineers to light sooner than others. Okay? Keep bringing it up again and again. And when you keep doing that, you're trying to bring that empathy towards that problem with the large organization. And then when you actually pitch your idea, people already have a context of in what you are pitching and why you are pitching that particular thing. Use your formal one-on-ones and use your informal hangouts to do the same. It looks like a lot of work, right? But yes, it is. But it is a lot of work only till you get a hang of things. Once you break that ice, once you have that rapport with your manager, with your product manager, with an executive, then things become a lot easier. Okay? So it takes typically only about 2 to 3 months to build that rapport where you can start having conversation. Okay? And these conversations have to be two-way. Don't just think of these relationships and conversations as a method of persuading, but also being persuadable yourself so that you can go and work on what you are going to pitch next. We were looking at how and where you can do persuasion. And one of the first things that you need to look at is when and where are products prioritized. Okay? So understanding the life cycle of when are the things prioritized, when are the features prioritized, when are the ideas prioritized in your organization is very, very important. If you're going to, if the check off or if the sign off for things that are going to be picked up is 30th of June, and you're going to start with an idea on 15th of July, it's not going to have success simply because it doesn't fall into the radar. Yes, if it is a breakthrough idea, everybody will probably run and get that going. But if it was a breakthrough idea, people might already have seen it. Okay, I'm again not discarding that there could be breakthrough ideas which can happen off cycle as well, but start with an assumption that you have to do the selling of that idea and you have to make that idea seem breakthrough rather than being convinced that it is breakthrough. Everyone is convinced all the time that their ideas are breakthrough. The challenge is getting others buy in that yes, it is breakthrough. Now there are 3 myths that are there in working with others that I wanted to talk about specifically. The very first myth that I hear a lot is that PMs, managers just don't like collaboration. They don't really want to listen to me. That's simply not true. Okay? It's not a one-way street. In fact, PMs and managers, they want you to surface the problems, they want you to surface the constraints, and they would want to know what is it that can be done to de-escalate the situation, what is it that can be done in getting the things that you have in your mind prioritized. Start with that assumption. And if you start with that assumption, then you will see the collaboration work a lot better versus where you are thinking that it is not going to happen. And there is that subtle mindset that you have, which then guides your behavior as well. engineering items will never be prioritized. I've heard this so many times in my career. Okay? And I can safely say most product managers are happy to prioritize engineering items, especially things which will make things flow a lot faster, things that will make the lives of engineers and QAs better, and things which will speed up the productivity of the teams as well. They are also happy working on items where they don't have to trouble engineering for small things, and they can do those things themselves too. Work with your product managers in identifying what those things are, what those things can be. And when you do that, you are going to have a far better success. Again, go back to the mindset. If the mindset is confrontational, if the mindset is that it's a zero-sum game, you're not going to get very far. Okay? But if you approach it that, yes, the other human being will listen and wants to collaborate, that is very, very important. And how do you do that? Go back, identifying who has the problem and what the problems are and what the size of that particular problem is. Another one that I hear is that PMs are just going to say no. What's the fun in even trying that? That's not true. Okay? PMs are saying no, but they're also saying yes. And they're saying yes to a lot of ideas that they actually do not generate themselves. And what ideas are being said yes to, what about those ideas made them say yes to is also very, very important. And understanding that is the key to getting your voice heard, making ideas that get prioritized, pitched as well. This leads us to our principle number 3. A lot of us want to be understood, but we don't want to be understanding. And the key to be understood is to understand first. And what all things do we need to understand? First of all, what is the vision and the mission of the organization, and what are the goals of the organization for this quarter, for this semester? That's such a crucial, important thing. If you are going to be swinging against the pendulum, the chances of what you are proposing getting prioritized are very, very low. But if you are going to be swinging with the pendulum, then it becomes a lot easier. Again, go back to the cycle that we talked about. When those goals are being set, you want to be there in getting prioritization of those particular goals as well. Okay? So that if engineering efficiency is something that you want to get prioritized, that is heard. If developer productivity is something that you want to get prioritized, that is heard. Getting them to the goals is the first step in getting your ideas prioritized. If that's not even a goal, then any ideas which actually run backwards from that goal are not going to be prioritized as well. Now, there are different kinds of organizations. There are 0 to 1 organizations, there are 1 to 10 organizations, there are 10 to 100 organizations, and then there are 100 to N organizations. Okay. Each of them is trying to optimize different things. 0 to 1 organizations, if your product doesn't have a product market fit and you're coming and proposing engineering efficiency items, they're not likely to be prioritized. The challenge is much different, and hence participate and go with the flow in identifying how to prove the value of that particular product. Similarly, when you are doing product scaling, any efficiency gains that you can highlight or any of the things that are there that you want to prove, if you can tie it back to how this will improve the growth of the organization, growth of the product, then you're going to have a higher chances of that getting prioritized. And the same is true for 10 to 100 and 100 to N. Chances are that your ideas in 10 to 100 and 100 to N will have a higher chances of getting prioritized, even if they're not towards the end customers. But you also have to understand that it's, while the broader theme of efficiency, the broader theme of productivity may get prioritized, within that, there will be also 100 other product ideas that may be floating around. So the challenge moves from getting influence over the goal to getting influence over how your idea influences that goal the most. Okay. Now, there is also a 0 to 1 challenge, and then there is a 1 to N challenge, as we saw in the last slide. it's very important to understand the context in which these organizations are set up to. 0 to 1 organizations are around innovation, typically product innovation. Okay? So the context is more on research, validation, and minimum viable products. And hence, wherever you can suggest on how you can cut corners, how you can move fast, how you can take tech debt, which is taken in a judicious way, that is going to be rewarded even more. Okay? The environment is going to be uncertain and indeterminable. So if you don't tie yourself to decisions that are long-term, if you don't take architectural decisions which tie you to making decisions that perhaps need to be undone, that's going to be more and more useful. Okay? Generalist skills, which is not just software engineering, not just product management, not just design, are going to be rewarded more and more. And you'll have lower set of stakeholders. So things like building relationships, collaboration are a lot better. 1 to N is completely different. It is about scale, it is about efficiency and optimization, and it is about predictable processes and functional competence. The challenge is that you have a larger number of stakeholders. Okay? So in 0 to 1, you have a chance of influencing the goals. In 1 to N, you may not have that much of a say in influencing the goals, but each of the goals may already have a budget, may already have a team working on it. The challenge shifts from how do I get my idea for this goal prioritized. Now, one important thing to understand in getting understood and understanding is that you have to keep speaking, you have to keep talking, you have to keep writing. That is very, very important. Okay? If what you are saying is not finding traction, figure out what is it that is missing. What is it that can be fixed? What is it that can be done better? Take feedback on that particular thing. I think that has a huge impact on how you are pitching those ideas at, whether it is to executives, product managers, managers, or to anybody else, and it will have a huge value add-on to you as a professional. And that brings us to our final and 4th principle, which is playing the long game, which perhaps is the most important principle of all. All of us seem to be in a hurry. We want that one meeting to decide everything, not just getting our idea or product prioritized, but also deciding our career growth, our increments, and so on. And that is a recipe for unhappiness. Things may be turning a lot faster than it was, say, 10 years, 20 years back, but some things still take time. And getting ideas prioritized is one of them as well. And one of the challenges that I see a lot of people struggle with is straight away going to when, which is when can we prioritize this particular thing? While the first thing that we need to do is a joint problem exploration, or what is called deep product thinking. In product thinking, you are exploring the problem, you are exploring the 7 steps that we spoke about. We are focusing on what value can we accrue. Once that is there, then we move to the project thinking, which is when can we schedule it? How fast should we schedule it? What are the milestones that we should have towards it? How can we accrue the value faster as well? That is very, very important. In the previous slides, we saw the project life cycle. Figure out that project life cycle. Figure out when the goals are getting prioritized, when the ideas are getting prioritized, and get your seat on the table at that particular period of time. Okay. Over a period of time, you also want to be influencing the way the ideas are prioritized themselves too. For instance, in my team, we have a process where for every semester, product managers coordinate and lead the prioritization exercise, but everyone from business to research to design to engineers has an equal say, and they all sign off on the projects together. Okay. So ensure that you understand the life cycle, and then second, influence that life cycle as well. But the most important slide that I have is for the last. Also understand you have gratitude and you give and you have love for your colleagues. Even if your idea is not prioritized, going through this exercise of building the relationships, going through this exercise of understanding your organization, their goals, their mission, their vision, what are the constraints in which your PMs, your managers, and executives are working, going through those 7 steps in furnishing your ideas, and most importantly, in playing the long game will have a huge impact on you as an individual. You will not be bitter. You will know how things are prioritized, how things happen, and more importantly, you are going to have an appreciation for your colleagues. Thank you for listening to me. If you need any practical insights, or if you had any examples, or you didn't agree with this, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat.